The Luhansk or Lugansk People's Republic is a disputed entity created by Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. It began as a breakaway state and was later annexed by Russia. The LPR claims Ukraine's Luhansk Oblast. Luhansk is the contested capital city. The LPR declared independence from Ukraine in the aftermath of the Revolution of Dignity and pro-Russian unrest in April 2014, alongside the Donetsk People's Republic and the Republic of Crimea. This marked the beginning of the war in Donbass, which is part of the wider Russo-Ukrainian War. Crimea was occupied and annexed by Russia in March 2014, whereas the LPR and DPR portrayed themselves as independent sovereign states for over 8 years, receiving very little international recognition. Ukraine viewed the LPR and the DPR as Russian puppet states and as terrorist organizations. On February 21, 2022, Russia recognized the LPR and the DPR as sovereign states, a move which was widely considered illegal internationally. 3 days later, on February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, partially under the pretext protecting the LPR and the DPR. On 23-27 September 2022, Russian installed officials in the occupied territories of Ukraine held disputed referendums on acceding to Russia as federal subjects. On September 30, 2022, Russia annexed the LPR, DPR, Kherson Oblast, and Zaporizhzhia Oblast. This revoked Russia's earlier recognition of the LPR and the DPR. After the annexation, Russia views the LPR and DPR as Russian republics, and Kherson and Zaporizhzhia as Russian oblasts. The United Nations General Assembly subsequently passed a resolution calling on countries not to recognize what it described as an attempted illegal annexation and demanded that Russia immediately, completely, and unconditionally withdraw. The LPR originally occupied the southern portion of Luhansk Oblast from 2014 to 2022. In the 2022 invasion, territory in the north was captured by Russian forces and nominally incorporated into the LPR. At its peak, almost the entire oblast had been occupied by Russia. However, small parts of the oblast have been recaptured by Ukraine in its eastern counter-offensive. Geography and demographics. The 2014 Constitution of the Luhansk People's Republic defined the territory of the republic as determined by the borders existing on the day of establishment, without describing the borders. From February 2015 up until February 2022, the LPR's de facto borders were the Russo-Ukrainian border, the border between Ukraine's Luhansk Oblast and Donetsk Oblast, and the line of contact with Ukrainian troops as defined in the Minsk agreements between Ukraine, Russia, and the OSCE. When the Russian president announced recognition of the republic's independence on February 22, 2022, he said we recognized all their fundamental documents, including the Constitution. And the Constitution spells out the borders within the Donetsk and Luhansk regions at the time when they were part of Ukraine. Ukraine's Luhansk Oblast and the LPR-controlled area from April 2014 to February 2022 are both landlocked. The highest point in left bank Ukraine is Mohyla-Mek Etna Hill above sea level, which is located in the vicinity of the city of Petrovsk, in LPR-controlled territory. In December 2017, approximately 1.4 million lived in the LPR's territory, with 435,000 in the city of Luhansk. Leaked documents suggest that less than 3 million people, less than half of the pre-war population, remained in the separatist territories that Moscow controlled in eastern Ukraine in early February 2022. And 38% of those remaining were pensioners. On February 18, 2022, the LPR and DPR separatist authorities ordered a general evacuation of women and children to Russia, and the next day a full mobilization of males able to hold a weapon in their hands. History. Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics are located in the historical region of Donbass, which was added to Ukraine in 1922. The majority of the population speaks Russian as their first language. Attempts by various Ukrainian governments to question the legitimacy of the Russian culture in Ukraine had since the declaration of independence of Ukraine often resulted in political conflict. In the Ukrainian national elections, a remarkably stable pattern had developed, where Donbass and the western Ukrainian regions had voted for the opposite candidates since the presidential election in 1994. Viktor Yanukovych, a Donetsk native, had been elected as a president of Ukraine in 2010. His overthrow in the 2014 Ukrainian Revolution led to protests in eastern Ukraine, which gradually escalated into an armed conflict between the newly formed Ukrainian government and the local armed militias. Formation. Occupation of government buildings. Territorial expansion. Status referendum. Declaration of Independence. Human rights in the early stages of the war. Static war period. On January 1, 2015, forces loyal to the Luhansk People's Republic ambushed and killed Alexander Bednov, head of a pro-Russian battalion called Batman. Bednov was accused of murder, abduction, and other abuses. An arrest warrant for Bednov and several other battalion members had been previously issued by the separatists' prosecutor's office. On February 12, 2015, DPR and LPR leaders Alexander Zakharchenko and Igor Plotnitsky signed the Minsk II agreement, although without any mention of their self-proclaimed titles or the republics. In the Minsk agreement it is agreed to introducing amendments to the Ukrainian constitution, the key element of which is decentralization and the holding of elections on temporary order of local self-governance in particular districts of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, based in the line set up by the Minsk Memorandum as of September 19, 2014. In return, rebel-held territory would be reintegrated into Ukraine. Representatives of the DPR and LPR continue to forward their proposals concerning Minsk II to the Trilateral Contact Group on Ukraine. Plotnitsky told journalists on February 18, 2015, "Will we be part of Ukraine? This depends on what kind of Ukraine it will be. If it remains like it is now, we will never be together." On May 20, 2015, the leadership of the federal state of Novorossiya announced the termination of the Confederation project. On April 19, 2016, planned local elections were postponed from April 24 to July 24, 2016. On July 22, 2016, this elections was again postponed to November 6, 2016. The LPR Prosecutor General's office announced late September 2016, that it had thwarted a coup attempt ring-leaded by former LPR-appointed Prime Minister Gennady Tsipkalov. Meanwhile, it had also imprisoned former LPR Parliamentary Speaker Alexei Karyakin and former LPR Interior Minister, Igor Kornet. DPR leader Zakharchenko said he had helped to thwart the coup. On February 4, 2017, LPR Defense Minister Oleg Anishchenko was killed in a car bomb attack in Luhansk. Separatists claimed Ukrainian secret services were suspected of being behind the attack, while Ukrainian officials suggested Anishchenko's death may be the result of an internal power struggle among rebel leaders. Mid-March 2017, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko signed a decree on a temporary ban on the movement of goods to and from territory controlled by the self-proclaimed Luhansk People's Republic and Donetsk People's Republic. This also means that since then Ukraine does not buy coal from the Donetsk Black Coal Basin. On November 21, 2017, armed men in unmarked uniforms took up positions in the center of Luhansk in what appeared to be a power struggle between the head of the Republic Plotnitsky and the LPR-appointed Interior Minister Igor Kornet. Media reports stated that the DPR had sent armed troops to Luhansk the following night. 3 days later, the website of the separatists stated that Plotnitsky had resigned for health reasons. Multiple war wounds, the effects of blast injuries took their toll. The website stated that Security Minister Leonid Pasiknik had been named acting leader until the next elections. Plotnitsky was stated to become the separatists' representative to the Minsk process. Plotnitsky himself did not issue a public statement on November 24, 2017. Russian media reported that Plotnitsky had fled the unrecognized republic on November 23, 2017, first traveling from Luhansk to Rostov-on-Don by car and then flying to Moscow's Sheremetyevo airport. On November 25 the 38-member separatist Republic's People's Council unanimously approved Plotnitsky's resignation. Pasiknik declared his adherence to the Minsk Accords, claiming the Republic will be consistently executing the obligations taken under these agreements. In June 2019 Russia started giving Russian passports to the inhabitants of the LPR and Donetsk People's Republic under a simplified procedure allegedly on humanitarian grounds. According to Ukrainian press, by mid-2021 500,000 Russian passports had been received by local residents. Deputy Kremlin Chief of Staff Dmitry Kozak stated in a July 2021 interview with Politique Internationale that 470,000 local residents had received a Russian passport. He added that as soon as the situation in Donbass is resolved, the general procedure for granting citizenship will be restored. In early June 2020, the LPR declared Russian as the only state language on its territory, removing Ukrainian from its school curriculum. Previously the separatist leaders had made Ukrainian LPR's second state language, but in practice it was already disappearing from school curricula prior to June 2020. In January 2021 the Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic stated in a Russian Donbass doctrine that they aimed to seize all of the territories of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast under control by the Ukrainian government in the near future. The document did not specifically state the intention of DPR and LPR to be annexed by Russia. Full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. On February 21, 2022, Russia recognized the independence of the DPR and LPR. The next day, the Federation Council of Russia authorized the use of military force, and Russian forces openly advanced into both territories. Russian President Vladimir Putin declared that the Minsk agreements no longer existed, and that Ukraine, not Russia, was to blame for their collapse. A military attack into Ukrainian government-controlled territory began on the morning of February 24, when Putin announced a special military operation to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. On May 6, as part of the Eastern Ukraine offensive, the Russian armed forces and Luhansk People's Republic military started a battle to capture Severodonetsk, the de facto administrative capital of Ukrainian-controlled Luhansk Oblast. On June 25, 2022, Severodonetsk was fully occupied by Russian and separatist forces. This was followed by the capture of Lysychansk on July 3, which brought all of Luhansk Oblast under the control of Russian and separatist forces. This resulted in a 63-day period during which the whole of Luhansk Oblast was controlled by separatist forces. However, during the 2022 Ukrainian Kharkiv counter-offensive starting on September 4, the village of Bilohorivka became contested between Ukrainian and Russian forces. On September 10, the village was confirmed to be under Ukrainian control. Recognition and international relations. The Luhansk People's Republic initially sought recognition as a sovereign state following its declaration of independence in April 2014. Subsequently, the LPR willingly acceded to the Russian Federation as a Russian federal subject in September-October 2022, effectively ceasing to exist as a sovereign state in any capacity and revoking its status as such in the eyes of the international community. The LPR claims direct succession to Ukraine's Luhansk Oblast. From 2014 to 2022, Ukraine, the United Nations, and most of the international community regarded the LPR as an illegal entity occupying a portion of Ukraine's Luhansk Oblast. The Donetsk People's Republic, which had a similar backstory, was regarded in the exact same way. Crimea's status was treated slightly differently since Russia annexed that territory immediately after its declaration of independence in March 2014. Up until February 2022, Russia did not recognize the LPR, although it maintained informal relations with the LPR. On February 21, 2022, Russia officially recognized the LPR and the DPR at the same time, marking a major escalation in the 2021-2022 diplomatic crisis between Russia and Ukraine. 3 days later, on February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of the entire country of Ukraine, partially under the pretext of protecting the LPR and the DPR. The war had wide-reaching repercussions for Ukraine, Russia, and the international community as a whole. In September 2022, Russia made moves to consolidate the territories that it had occupied in Ukraine, including Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and Zaporizhzhia oblasts. Russia officially annexed these 4 territories in September-October 2022. Between February 2022 and October 2022, in addition to receiving Russian recognition, the LPR was recognized by North Korea and Syria. This means that 3 United Nations member states recognized the LPR in total throughout its period of de facto independence. The LPR was also recognized by 3 other breakaway entities, the DPR, South Ossetia, and Abkhazia. Relations with Ukraine. The LPR has been in a state of armed conflict with Ukraine ever since the former declared independence in 2014. The Ukrainian military operation against the Republic is officially called an anti-terrorist operation, although it is not considered to be a terrorist entity by the Supreme Court of Ukraine itself nor by either the EU, the US, or Russia. Relations with Russia. During most of its lifetime, Russia did not recognize the LPR as a state. It nevertheless recognized official documents issued by the LPR authorities, such as identity documents, diplomas, birth and marriage certificates and vehicle registration plates. This recognition was introduced in February 2017 and enabled people living in LPR-controlled territories to travel, work or study in Russia. According to the presidential decree that introduced it, the reason for the decree was to protect human rights and freedoms in accordance with the widely recognized principles of international humanitarian law. Ukrainian authorities decried the decree and claimed that it was contradictory to the Minsk II agreement, and also that it legally recognized the quasi-state terrorist groups which cover Russia's occupation of part of Donbass. On February 21, 2022, the Russian government recognized the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics in dawn of 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine. During the invasion, forces from the LPR fought together with Russian forces against Ukraine. On July 3, 2022, Russia claimed to have full control over Ukraine's Luhansk Oblast. Dmitry Medvedev, former Russian president and as of July 2022 vice chairman of the Russian Security Council, in July 2022 shared a map of Ukraine wherein most of Ukraine, including LPR, had been absorbed by Russia. Administrative divisions. In 2020, Luhansk Oblast conducted an administrative reform, reducing its 32 regions to 8 districts. The LPR uses the oblast's old administrative divisions on its controlled territory. See List of rayons of Ukraine 12. Luhansk Oblast. Government and politics. Constitution. The People's Council of the LPR ratified a temporary constitution on May 18, 2014. Its government styles itself as a People's Republic. The form of the Luhansk People's Republic's parliament is called the People's Council and has 50 deputies. Alexei Karyakin was elected as its first head on May 18, 2014. Its anthem is Glory to Luhansk People's Republic, also known as Live and Shine, LPR. Al Jazeera described the republic's ideology as neo-Stalinism, a totalitarian, North Korea-like statelet. Elections. The first parliamentary elections to the legislature of the Luhansk People's Republic were held on November 2, 2014. People of at least 30 years old who permanently resided in Luhansk People's Republic the last 10 years were electable for 4 years and could be nominated by public organizations. All residents of Luhansk Oblast were eligible to vote, even if they are residents of areas controlled by Ukrainian government forces or fled to Russia or other places in Ukraine as refugees. Ukraine urged Russia to use its influence to stop the election to avoid a frozen conflict. Russia, on the other hand, indicated it will of course recognize the results of the election. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that the election will be important to legitimize the authorities there. Ukraine held the 2014 Ukrainian parliamentary election on October 26, 2014. These were boycotted by the Donetsk People's Republic and hence voting for it did not take place in Ukraine's eastern districts controlled by forces loyal to the Luhansk People's Republic. On July 6, 2015, the Luhansk People's Republic leader Igor Plotnitsky set elections for mayors and regional heads for November 1, 2015 in territory under his control. Leader Alexander Zakharchenko issued a decree on July 2, 2015 that ordered local DPR elections to be held on October 18, 2015. He said that this action was in accordance with the Minsk agreements. On October 6, 2015, the DPR and LPR leadership postponed their planned elections to February 21, 2016. This happened 4 days after a Normandy 4 meeting in which it was agreed that the October 2015 Ukrainian local elections in LPR and DPR-controlled territories would be held in accordance to the February 2015 Minsk II agreement. At the meeting, President of France François Hollande stated that in order to hold these elections it was necessary, since we need 3 months to organize elections, to hold these elections in 2016. Also during the meeting, it is believed that Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed to use his influence to not allow the DPR and Luhansk People's Republic election to take place on October 18, 2015 and November 1, 2015. On November 4, 2016, both DPR and LPR postponed their local elections, they had set for November 6, 2016, until further notice. Additional elections took place simultaneously in Donetsk and Luhansk republics on November 11, 2018. The official position of the US and European Union is that this vote is illegitimate because it was not controlled by the Ukrainian government, and that it was contrary to the 2015 Minsk agreement. Leonid Pasiknik, the head of the Luhansk People's Republic, disagreed and said that the vote was in accordance with the Minsk agreement. The separatist leaders said that the election was a key step toward establishing full-fledged democracy in the regions. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko said that residents of eastern Ukraine should not to participate in the vote. Nevertheless, both regions reported voter turnout of more than 70% as of 2 hours before the polls closed at 8 p.m. local time. Public opposition in the LPR is virtually non-existent. Currency. As of May 2015, pensions started being paid in mostly Russian rubles by the Luhansk People's Republic. 85% were in rubles, 12% in hryvnias, and 3% in dollars according to LPR head Igor Plotnitsky. Ukraine completely stopped paying pensions for the elderly and disabled in areas under DPR and LPR control on December 1, 2014. Postal Services. LPR Post is the postal authority of the Luhansk People's Republic, a division of the Ministry of Communications of the LPR. It was founded in 2014 in supplement and succession to the Ukrainian Postal Service Ukrpochta. As of 2022 it is not a member of the Universal Postal Union. The General Director of LPR Post is Marina Pukhotseva. Military. The People's Militia of the LPR comprise the Russian separatist forces in the LPR. On October 7, 2014, by decree Igor Plotnitsky, the People's Militia was created, with Oleg Bugrov serving as Minister of Defense and the Commander-in-Chief of the People's Militia. It has been reported that it is under the control 2nd Army Corps, which is subordinated to the specially created 12th Reserve Command of the Southern Military District of the Russian Armed Forces at its headquarters in the city of Novocherkassk, Rostov Oblast. By 2016 Russian officers commanded the LPR units from the battalion level up. The former commanders, some of whom retained substantial personal security forces, sometimes acted as deputy commanders. Sports and culture. The football team of the Luhansk People's Republic is ranked 16th in the Confederation of Independent Football Associations World Ranking. A football match between LPR and DPR was played on August 8, 2015 at the Metalurh Stadium in Donetsk. Human rights. Freedom House evaluates the eastern Donbas territories controlled by the LPR and DPR as not free, scoring 4 out of 100 in its 2022 Freedom in the World Index. Concerns include tight control over politics by the security services, leaving no room for meaningful opposition, and severe restrictions on local media. Pro-Ukrainian bloggers and journalists have been given long prison sentences, and social media users have been arrested for critical posts. Freedom House also reported that there was a prevailing hostility to the Ukrainian ethnic identity and an intensifying campaign against the Ukrainian language and identity. Basic due process guarantees are not followed and arbitrary arrests and detentions are common. The UN said in a 2020 report that interviews with released prisoners confirmed patterns of torture and ill treatment. There have been numerous reports of abuse, sexual violence, and torture in separatist prisons and detention centers. A 2022 report by Al Jazeera said that the republics are understood to have evolved into totalitarian, North Korea-like statelets, and that reportedly thousands have been tortured and abused in cellars under the separatist authorities.